Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 2025 Access, Innovation, and Disability Symposium. We're so excited to have you here. My apologies, I'm choking on nothing. We are so excited to have you here. Funding for this symposium was made possible through CU Boulder's Impact Grant, the Office for Access and Community Engagement in the College of Arts and Sciences, CU Libraries, and Be Well. My name is Sonia. I use they and AA pronouns, and I am a member of the symposium's planning committee. For those of you that require a visual description, I have curly brown hair, beaded earrings that you can see sometimes among the hair, glasses, a black and purple shirt, and I have a background that is the disability flag over some mountains, as well as a QR code, which if you scan just sends you to the Access, Innovation, and Disability Symposium webpage. So very excited about that. Before I introduce today's session, I would like to remind everybody to mute themselves during the presentation. Closed captioning is available by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you are not seeing a CC kind of in a square shape with the word captions underneath it, you'll want to click on the button that has a circle with 3 dots inside it labeled more, and then you'll find the exact same symbol, that CC in a square with captions in that piece there. These are auto-generated by Zoom, which means that they are not necessarily perfect, but they are really well done for being instantaneous, right? So just a reminder there, and if you need us to repeat anything, please feel free to let us know. Do please feel free to use the chat or your reaction emojis during the presentation to interact with one another, and we will reserve the last 10 to 15 minutes of this hour together for questions, during which time you're free to raise your hand or use the chat as needed. Both Marcia and I will be on the chat, so if you would like something to be shared more anonymously, we are happy to do that for you as well. And thank you so much for joining us for Elucidating the Student Experience, the Perspective of People with Disabilities at CU Boulder, as provided by the Association for Students with Disabilities. And I'm so very excited to introduce ASWD. Please note that this session is recorded and will be later added to the ACE Office's YouTube channel. I'm forgetting what ACE stands for, Marcia, if you could please remind me briefly.
Access and Community Engagement in the College of Arts and Sciences.
Thank you so much. And a quick note before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that today, October 13th, is Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're going to go ahead and share some links in the chat for resources that are around Native and Indigenous identities as well as disability. So keeping that in mind, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Alexander, and I hope that y'all have as wonderful as a time talking to these students as I often do.
Hi. So as stated before, all of us are members of the Association for Students with Disabilities, or ASWD. We are a registered student organization on campus focused on building a sense of community and connectedness among the disabled students here at CU. This panel discussion is meant to center our perspectives as disabled students to help everyone here better understand our perspectives at CU Boulder. I'm Alexander Cisneros. I use he, him pronouns, and I am an undergraduate political science major, Spanish minor with a certificate in peace, conflict, and security studies. The rest of the panelists here are now going to introduce themselves, their pronouns, their major, and if they want a fun fact about them.
All right, my name is Orion. I use they, them pronouns. I am a 5th year undergrad here at CU Boulder, where I study biology, both eBio and MCDB. And a fun fact about myself is I have lived in 5 or 6 different states, depending on which you count as having lived somewhere and such.
Okay, hi, my name is Jennifer Wu. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a 2nd year PhD student in mechanical engineering. And a fun fact about myself is I like singing. Also, a visual description for those who can't see is I am an Asian American woman wearing glasses and a Sherpa vest.
Hi, I'm Ash. I use they, them pronouns. I am a speech language and hearing science major with a minor in writing and public engagement in Spanish. A fun fact about me is that I really like kayaking.
All right. So our first question kind of eases us into this discussion is, what is something people misunderstand about your disability or disabilities?
I think that I'm mostly well, I'm neurodivergent. I have autism and ADHD, and I think that people just don't get how pervasive the executive dysfunction that comes with ADHD can be, and how there are people often think things are, laziness, because that's kind of what it can look like from the outside when people just can't do things. But the reality is there are so many times when I really want to be productive. I really do genuinely want to get started on something, but my brain just gets stuck. And it's like trying to wade through, 4 feet of, uh, of peanut butter or something just sticky and gross, and you just can't get out of it until you finally do, and then you're off to the races and everything's easy again. But just getting past the first hump is so much harder than people think it is, and it's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I just don't want to. It's because it's genuinely hard sometimes to just get going, and it's hard to explain why. But that's the main thing I wish people understood a bit better.
Something I wish people saw more is just how disabilities can intersect. I have some injuries from compensating for nerves in my leg that just don't really like to slide. Um, and that makes navigating campus extremely difficult, and hence why I got two overuse injuries on both of my knees. And being injured and having ADHD really sucks. Because if I want to get my homework done, I need the sensory input of sitting in these like weird and funky positions. But if I do that, my knees hurt. And so for an entire year, I just had to go without that. And I need exercise to function even when medicated. But when I'm injured, not only since I have quite a history of injuries. Not only does that take a toll on my mental health, but it also takes a huge toll on my executive function when I can't exercise. Um, yeah.
I have left-sided hemiplegia due to a brain injury, and it's a very visible disability, and it's pretty obvious like what my limitations are. But I think something that people can misunderstand is just like how much energy is associated with just my day-to-day activities, and sometimes just trying to live is just really tiring. Yeah.
Yeah. Then moving into our first major topic that we kind of want to cover are hidden challenges with disabilities. And I'm wondering, so then our question for this topic is, what are the hidden challenges that you face because of your disability or disabilities?
So this goes back to mostly more ADHD than autism, but even though of course, as I mentioned earlier, I have both. But one thing I think people don't always see is the amount of time executive dysfunction could take out of your day. I once had a psychiatrist say that it sounded like I was doing I was functioning half as well, and I just had to do it twice as much as everyone else, because the executive dysfunction makes it so hard to just get started on stuff and get through stuff. In the amount of nights where I've been up till 2 or 3 a.m. trying to do a normal course load worth of homework, just because I can't get my brain to stay on the topic. And that affects, that always creates a runaway cycle where then it's a sleep issue, and then that makes it even harder. And it's hard to, once that gets going, to get out of it. People often don't think about the amount of time that takes and the way that can have impacts further on. And also just like with my social life, like it's harder to be social and go places and hang out with people because I'm always trying to be productive because I never can. So people don't always think about that in those terms. It's not just how much harder it is to focus, it's how much more time things take and how that can affect every aspect of your life.
One thing that I kind of wish people saw more and that wasn't so hidden was just how hard it is to navigate anywhere with a disability. Like, yeah, sure, there's buttons, but they're never in like the right spot, or they're only for like half of this doorway. And so when you're coming from the other way, you'll have to like cross oncoming traffic to get through the door that just opened, or um or just like people don't realize that if someone doesn't see a button for a door, they're not gonna try, and depending on the day and how severe the pain is that day, they might not try and look for the button and instead try to push this heavy door anyways, because that was me all last year. And then it's just like Ketchum, for example. The accessible parking is not by the accessible entrance. You have to go all the way around. And then if you have to go to the second floor, you have to go into to the elevator and then like back out to the classroom. And people just don't realize that every step counts. And over the course of the day, it really builds up. It doesn't seem much when you're just trying to get to that one class, but by the end of the day, the pain can be excruciating, and I wish people actually brought in disabled architects and designers to actually design things that are supposed to be accessible.
I second everything that Ash said. And I kind of lost count, like how many times I've been like crushed by elevator doors because I'm like not fast enough to go in before they close. Yeah, and a lot of the hidden challenges I face are definitely with like navigation, because CU Boulder's campus is so large and there are like multiple campuses, and it's very difficult to get from place to place. And also the sidewalks here are so terrible and the roads are just falling apart for some reason. And since I use a mobility scooter, I definitely feel how bumpy it is when I try to get to the school and stuff. Mhm.
No, I definitely second what Ash said. I feel like a lot of these issues that we currently face would not be an issue if disabled people were actually consulted and the decision-making abilities. So many people of the disability community have multiple identities, whether that's being part of the LGBTQ plus community, being people of color, or beyond that. So what are some of the intersectional challenges that you or some of your peers who have intersectional identities face? I'm trying not to talk a lot since I'm moderating.
I think one of the major barriers is just access to care. Because every system of oppression is very systematic. And when hold on, sorry. And so when like insurance is already hard, on top of that, it's based off of employment, which not all people are able to have. And then once you start throwing like race into the mix, it becomes even harder because a lot of people don't want to hire people of color. I'm half Latina and half of my family lives in Paraguay, and that country has been really messed up by many dictators, and I got to see the firsthand experience of seeing my white grandmother have every access to everything she needed as she aged, whereas my grandparents in Paraguay did not have that. We suspect that my grandfather there had some form of dementia, but he could never even get a diagnosis, much less like any sort of at-home hospice care or even respite care. That was never an option for them. In addition to that, they lived in poverty. And so every hospital trip was a lot more stress because it's like, are we gonna have food to eat? So I would say access to care is a big one. And as for being queer, like I got dead named in Wardenburg this morning. So that sucks. And I'm just trying to get in for a concussion. But I shouldn't have to think for every provider, am I gonna be okay here? And am I gonna run into some issue because of being a trans non-binary person? If I bring up an issue related to that or anything to do with my body, are they going to be weird about it? It's just a lot more stress.
One thing that I find what people don't often think about a lot is just the way that different marginalized identities kind of stack up cumulatively. For instance, there is a LGBTQ pay gap, right? Queer people tend to make about 85 cents to 90 cents on the dollar compared to what the average person makes. Of course, this depends on which data set you look at, the methodology, the estimates, and of course, it's hard to find good data for how that's different from like cis gay people versus trans people, etc. But the fact is, like, it's undeniably true that queer people make less money, right? And that just demonstrates a certain way that they are, I don't want to say less valued by society, but at least have a harder time making it to certain places in society cumulatively. There's also a pay gap for disabled people, and of course that's also very complicated. It depends on the field, the career, the type of disability, but it generally tends to be a lot bigger than the one for queer people. But the fact is, if you're living both of those experiences at the same time, you're going to have a struggle that's not fully known to start, that someone who's in just one of those identity groups won't be able to fully understand, right? It's going to be different. It's going to be harder. It just narrows out the world that you can operate in just that much more. I personally, like, I know that being autistic, I struggle with tone sometimes. I talk too loud. I talk too fast. I say things without fully understanding that they'll have a different connotation than what I learned it from. These are the sorts of things that are common people with autism. But the fact, and that has been an issue for me in job interviews. I also know, since I'm queer, I use they them pronouns. That's not something I can exactly not mention in a job interview, because unless I want to be misgendered and been named. So, you know, it just, the way that they both work together, it's just each of them is just one more sort of challenge that people don't always think about. And I wish more people understood that, I guess.
Yeah, another layer of my disability experience is cultural. So my family is from Taiwan, and I had the opportunity to visit my mom's family there last winter, and I think with younger people it's not as bad, but with my grandma it's very obvious that she sees being disabled as something shameful. And I think for people in like these homogenized cultures in East Asia, they can really feel that, and it's very difficult to kind of overcome that barrier and really advocate for yourself.
Kind of like adding on to that, like with talking specifically like with autism in the United States, like uh, there is like generally white male children tend to be diagnosed as autistic at higher rates than children of color or female children. Um, partly because when it probably because like lack of knowledge and information, but also sometimes like the assumption that when it comes to children of color, when they act in atypical ways, that it is not due to them being neurodiverse, it is due to them just being problematic. And that is itself pretty problematic and just makes it a lot more difficult for diagnoses to be for like children from those communities to get diagnoses and then even be able to find adequate communities of fellow autistic people to actually support them. And I guess that kind of moves it toward our third sort of major topic, which is improvement to university policies. So what do y'all think is the biggest thing that CU could do to improve quality of life for disabled students?
Oh gosh, where to begin with this one? It's hard to give just one thing because there's so many little things. Like just having, I guess this isn't really so little when you look at it from a funding perspective, but just having more availability for people to talk to disability services at the beginning of the semester. Because I know my first semester here, I procrastinated a little bit and I didn't reach out to like the first week, thinking like, oh, it's the first week. Surely they'll have, you know, like I won't have any tests by the first week. It's fine if my accommodations don't go through for a few more weeks. Well, it turns out just getting an appointment took a few more weeks at that point. If I had known how booked they are and registered for one like in the summer prior, it would have been fine. But ended up I couldn't get my accommodations. So after I had my first few tests, my first few midterms for the semester, that's unacceptable. I mean, sure, I could have avoided it if I had registered sooner, but everyone can't register sooner because there's not enough people. And someone who's going in for like I transferred from a community college where they had walk-in appointments to talk about this, and there was generally enough availability that maybe you'd wait half an hour, but rarely longer. Just if the disability offices just had more institutional supports, more funding, more people, more time, longer hours for those of us who also work and maybe can't find a lot of availability between 9 and 5 or whatever their hours are. I think that would make it a huge difference. And also, I know you said one thing, but I'm going to throw one more in. If they could just have more flexible options for what accommodations can look like, because it seems like it's almost like, I don't know how exactly it works, but it's almost like they have a list of these are the things we can give people. And so I have friends who go in because they need some specific type of accommodation, and they're like, well, how does extra time on tests sound? And that's not what I needed. I needed access to, I don't know, screen reader or something, whatever it might be. That's not a specific example I know firsthand of, but like people going in for something that they've had at previous institutions, and then they say, well, we can't do that. Here's 10 other cookie cutter accommodations that maybe are good for 80% of people, but not the last 20. They need to be more flexible. They need to be able to have, be able to do things in a more specific way that can be useful for people who aren't the cookie cutter student, I guess.
Again, I'm still trying not to talk a whole lot, but we're talking policies, and so I'm really interested. And like I think kind of adding on to like what you said, Orion, like definitely having more resources for people to be able to get like at the university to get either formal documentation or even like formal diagnoses to even be able to have those meetings in the first place about getting their accommodations. Like I have a friend who last year really struggled with their like the tests where you have them in like the huge room because they simply could not focus because they could not get the accommodations that they needed because they could not get those accommodations unless they had a formal diagnosis, which is not necessarily accessible to everybody. They got them now, which is good, over the summer because they were able to have the time and space to actually get that formal diagnosis, but they were not able to do so and get that documentation actually at the university during the school year.
Ignore the sunglasses. I have like a concussion and the light that has gone on too much
It
for
looks
me to
cool,
not
though.
wear sunglasses right now. But another thing I wanted to add was that because a lot of other schools have a system where if you are injured or have mobility issues, they can just help you get you to your classes, which is great because the buses fill up and a full bus is accessible for literally no one. But CU doesn't have that. And I have chronic ankle pain from the whole like nerves don't slide in one leg issue. And I had this huge flare up within like the first 2 weeks of class last year. And I was a freshman, I was trained, I lived in Kittredge. And so like the buff bus straight up wasn't even an option because you're in Kittredge, you're just close enough where the bus doesn't actually help you, but you're just far enough to make it a challenge. And because of that, I got 2 overuse injuries on both of my knees just from walking everywhere. I was in incredible amounts of pain. I straight up would walk around with a knee brace on one knee and like an ace bandage on the other with the cane. And it's been a year since that happened, and I'm still not fully back to 100% because, again, it's the constant walking to all of my classes, and some of my classes were in McKenna. And if you know where that is, and if you know where Kittredge is, you know that is clear, like as far apart as you can get on this campus. And a lot of my classes since like day one have only had one section available, and I need these classes for my degrees. So I couldn't just like go to a different class. I couldn't swap it out like that. And the thing is, having some sort of disabled and injury transportation system would also help able-bodied people on this campus because Coloradoans are kind of crazy in that they love to ski and snowboard. And the in the winter, there's always a ton of people walking around on crutches. Once in Norland, I saw this person who straight up had these, I call them ice pick attachments. Um, Basically, they can go on your cane, but this poor guy in Norland had an ice pick attachment on both of his crutches so that he wouldn't fall on his face on the packed snow. And so it would just be so much easier for everyone on this campus if we had something like that. Because crutches give you bruises and your backpack rubs up against them, and it's just awful for your body.
I want to jump back in real quick, build off one of the things you said, Ash, which is talking about how often scheduling considerations make it inevitable that you have a long way to go and not much time to get there. Which of course is maybe fine if you are perfectly abled and you can just hop on one of the buff buses and it doesn't matter how packed it is. And you can, even if it's standing room only, if that's fine for you, then you'll probably be all right with that. But like, I also think that the lack of real flexibility in scheduling from having such limited options for so many courses really is a problem here. I think it's also a problem for perfectly able people, right? Because I'm like in my MCDB major, I have to take a capstone. There's only 3 options for capstones, one of which is only available in the fall, one of which is only available in the spring. The other, in theory, is available both, but hasn't actually been offered for years now. It's still on the website though. And the fact is, if you can't happen to make the whatever the time is for that capstone, it could push your back your graduation. And this is something that everyone in the major is required to take. How is it acceptable to have only one possible section of one class that could meet this requirement? How is there not more options or some other workaround available? It's not just a disability thing. That's, I think, an everyone thing. Which is another great example of how accessibility helps everyone.
Yeah. My major has had the intro classes have only one section available. And freshman registration was a nightmare because of that. Because you're like, well, I hope I get into the classes for my major. I almost didn't. And I came in with some dual enrollment credit. And so I was kind of like the first part of the like wave of freshmen registering, and even then I still got waitlisted for the class that was recommended to be taken with the other class I needed, because apparently you're not supposed to take hearing science and language development at the same time. That's not recommended. So
Yeah, like Ash, I was very unpleasantly surprised by CU's lack of on-campus transportation, because nearly every other university offers this kind of service for disabled people and people with temporary injuries. So it's very, very strange that CU doesn't. And when I first asked Disability Services about this, they just kept telling me repeatedly, oh, the buff buses are accessible. And there's like no route that goes from my apartment to campus that works for me. And because of that, I was forced to buy a $1,600 mobility scooter just to be able to get to class from my apartment. And again, I was like, well, what do I do if there's snow and I can't like ride on my mobility scooter? And they were like, oh, the buff buses are accessible. And no, my scooter does not fit on a buff bus. And only after I filed a grievance and an appeal were so it went up to the director of like student health and wellness, and he was able to approve like third party paratransit for me, and they would pay the fares. And it just took so long. I do have another story that is also even more outrageous. So because of my left-sided hemiplegia, I can't lift my trash and put it in the dumpster behind my apartment. So I asked Disability Services if they could like arrange some sort of trash pickup service for me, because it is not a good thing to just live with a lot of trash. and so Disability Services denied my request because it is a quote unquote personal service to request this thing. And only after like months of filing this grievance and an appeal was I able to get some trash cans placed behind my apartment, which was a really simple thing to do, but they were just like, they just had to make my life as hard as possible. And it really felt like during the beginning, when I first entered CU Boulder as a PhD student, I felt like Disability Services was really trying their hardest to like push me out, and like, because they don't want to have to deal with me. And I think on an institutional level, there needs to be a lot of change with Disability Services.
Like sort of change away from like it being essentially like a, I want to, for lack of a better word, like a bumper sticker. Like, yes, we have this. We can mark it off the checklist without actually fully committing to it. And
It's
Orion, I saw you had.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, them calling the buff bus accessible is actually kind of crazy. Like, have you been on the buff bus during the times of day when you actually need to get to class? And God forbid someone have an invisible disability where maybe they need to sit down, but it doesn't look like they do to other people. And just like, they're not accessible. But what I think the thing I really wanted to add is it seems like, and the same thing we were talking about with the accessible buildings and stuff, a lot of people who design things and a lot of people who make sure things are accessible seem to think of accessibility as this very binary thing. Like it's just it's just a building code where there's a set of rules. You know, the wheelchair ramp has to be 1 inch of rise per foot of distance. It's a bunch of rules like that. And as long as they check the boxes, they think that it's like quote unquote accessible. And they don't realize how accessibility is so much more complicated than anything that could ever be codified in a set of rules like the ADA. Like that's start. Like, yes, make things meet those rules. But the design from, you know, the buildings to the buses to just the way that we do things has to be more thoughtful than that. If that makes any sense.
Yes. To add on to that, I once was in a disabled bathroom in a building. Can't remember which one. It's one of the ones that I'm not in most of the time. It might have been Munsinger, but Munsinger is really like one of like 2 or 3 buildings, so it gets really confusing. And I was in there and I noticed that the trash can for menstrual products was this tiny little metal box in the very far corner. And the toilet's like all the way over here. And I'm like, who in the right mind thought that would work? Because not all people can reach. And also, like, that doesn't work on any level, because if you need to use that trash can, you need to use it while you're on the toilet. Like, that's kind of how this entire system works. And that was a wee bit like infuriating, because like if someone were trying to use that bathroom and was on their period and had to use disposable period products, they now can't throw away their trash when they need to, and they have to just casually carry that with them as they try and find another trash can that they can use.
Yeah, those are all really good points. And what that about brings us to kind of like the time for like having the last 15 minutes for questions. So Sonia, I'm not sure how you'd want to handle that. Like, are you reading them out, or like are we just going to see them come in the chat? Like, yeah.
I'm happy to read them out from the chat if that is helpful, or people can jump off of mute for their questions. We do have a number of comments in the chat if there's any that any of y'all want to address.
Haley Matthews comments about the all the golf carts that CU seems to have lying around that you constantly are dodging on all the walkways. They clearly are there. There's clearly the institution can afford them, but they're not available for people who need transportation to class due to disabilities. That's exactly what we were asking for, or that's exactly what Jennifer was asking for. Just something simple like that. Other universities do this. It's commonplace. They have it for the athletes when the athletes have an injury, from what I've heard, but not for general students. I think it really gives away institutional priorities that they can afford all of the football stuff that they have. Like a coach that takes tens of millions a year of salary, but a student needing help to get to class, which could be solved with something as simple as a little electric golf cart that they already have anyways, is too much to ask.
Also, it wouldn't be hard to get students to drive these golf carts or golf carts at for like a student job. It really would not be hard. And given how Night Ride works, they seem to have figured out the liability stuff that comes with that. So like if you can figure it out for Night Ride, which is objectively more complicated, then I think you can figure it out here. Additionally, like the world just doesn't seem to understand that young people can be disabled. And when they are disabled, it's not just because they did something stupid. I once broke my ankle walking on flat, level ground. I was walking slowly. I just happened to roll my ankle and then boom, it was broken. Like, it's most of the time we don't enjoy ourselves doing crazy things. And like trying to find a cane that wouldn't trigger my gender dysphoria, but that was also something that wasn't boring is something like I never fully finished doing because like I needed it to be foldable, but all the like colorful canes are made for old ladies, and I am not that in any of the senses. Yeah.
There's also just kind of like a general conception, like not just like with the university, but like even going more broadly, that disability, or kind of like more specifically, like with my experience, like neurodiversity is only something that applies to kids, not actual adults. Like it's like, yeah, no, we know these things exist up till maybe about high school, but after that, like autistic adults, they don't exist. No, it's only talking about the rising epidemic among among kids. That was sarcasm, by the way. Tones are sometimes a little bit difficult, but like this incredibly narrow view that it's only that like that we're all like really focused on kids, which would be good if we're actually providing them like the resources and supports that they need to be able to like set them up for success later on in life. But you do fundamentally need to be providing those necessary supports throughout an individual's life and in their academic career and their life, so they can be as successful as possible. And that's kind of missed.
Yeah, and to add on to that, unless if I'm in a space that's very neurodivergent or disability friendly, when I unmask, I'm typically viewed as childish for just being hyperactive and excited. And by excited, I mean like literally squealing with excitement. And it's so weird how ableism plays into what our society views as childish. Because like, let me be excited and happy and joyous about vocal folds. Like that's literally all you need in life sometimes. And um and so it's like either be a child, or if you're not, then we're gonna put you into that child box just so that we're more comfortable with you. And like lately I've been walking around campus with like a stuffed animal with me because I've been going through a really hard time. And I'm some people just like openly stare at me. Other people are like so with it though, and you can see how much they want to have the courage to carry a stuffed animal with them when that shouldn't really have to be like a courageous thing. You can just do it if you want to. Comfort items are a great thing to have on you.
I just want to say, if anyone, oh, actually, never mind. Amanda Boyke has a question in the chats asking about perspectives on Canvas and how it's used in our courses, what parts of it are hard to navigate and what work well. Are there things that faculty do within Canvas that really help your learning or hinder it? I will say I came from a community college that used a completely different system called D2L, and it was just better. Things made more sense. What the heck is a module? The Canvas is weird. I don't love Canvas. I don't know if that's a disability thing or a preference thing on my part, but I think Alexander has something to add.
Yeah, like mainly for me, like consistently using the modules page on Canvas and like just use like yeah, I like generally I think I have less issues with Canvas than perhaps others. But like the biggest thing for me is like, hey, you can use it as a great organizational tool. So you know what's coming up in class, so you can readily access the slides. Just that's not always how professors use it, so it kind of varies from professor to professor. And I think
Yeah, professors don't get a lot of support, especially initially, on how to use Canvas. And Canvas is just this settings rabbit hole of more settings. You get just lost so easily. And I have an instructor who, this is his first time ever teaching, and his Canvas page is so hard to navigate because he had so much trouble trying to figure out where to put things, and there is almost too many options. And everything is just kind of in a strange place because he's kind of misinterpreted about what it's for, and like are still like the PowerPoints are under pages. The syllabus is linked under syllabus. Or no, the syllabus is it somewhere else. I don't even know where it is. The course schedule is linked under syllabus. And then there's announcements. And then the pages also have random resources in there. And that's literally it. And there's nothing even in files. Which, like, most of my professors have used modules, which I really like, but I have this one professor who just only uses files, which I feel like it's kind of the same thing, but also not really. So that took getting used to. And I think, especially initially, professors just need a whole lot more support with Canvas in general to set up something that makes sense and be offered the chance to get student feedback on how easy or hard it is to navigate their Canvas page. Yeah.
I think there just needs to be like a style guide for Canvas. I know my last school, they used D2L, like I said, but different professors were just doing it differently. And then the school basically standardized and said, okay, like these are the ways to do it. We're going to have things organized either by the units or by the week or by the month. Within that, you should have such and such and such and such. But like here, every professor does it differently. Some of them do it really badly. I had one professor who everything was in a Google slide. Like you'd get the lecture slides for the whole unit, and then like the link for different homeworks would just be in a specific slide of the Google Slides. You just had to find the right and then click the link. There was no, sometimes there would be a direct path from the module. Sometimes you just have to find the slide and click, and there would be a link in the slides. Like, I get it's not, it just needs to be consistent. Do we want to move on to another question then?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
Faye Kolig, I hope I said your name right. My apologies. Am I not able to? Faye Kolig, I apologize if I got the name wrong. Said, I think awareness campaigns on campus generally about how invisible disabilities and neurodivergence would be good. There's lots of mental health awareness, but not a lot for severe, complicated, long-term, or less socially acceptable ways of being ill disabled. And I think that's needed. And I couldn't agree more.
okay. My biggest question, like, yes, we absolutely do need that. And like like the reason that I like this sort of panel, especially in like something that I think should be carried over to like anything in that kind of vein, is like having actually neurodiverse, having actually disabled students being the ones being like the actual voices uh for them actually driving that kind of push. Because especially turning back to like autistic advocacy, like the biggest thing like historically that you see with autism movements that are fundamentally dominated by parents of autistic children who sometimes do not have the best the most healthy conception of autism or disability, which is the most polite way that I can possibly put it. And so I think it is fundamental that neurodiverse students take the lead on putting on these sorts of panels and actually speaking on them to have the best effect for everyone.
There's also some talk and chat from future people about higher ups or people with positions of authority and power in the university should be attending these sorts of things. I agree. I know that they have busy schedules, but I think that it sort of betrays their priorities where they spend their time. And when that's on football things, I think that more so than it is on like helping disabled students, I think that says a lot. Yeah, but like other people said, they don't listen to me. I can't tell them where to go, but does anyone else have any questions? If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them into the chat for us. Otherwise, I will continue complaining about Canvas for the rest of the hour.
Actually, I guess while we're waiting for more questions in chat, I guess I'm kind of curious to hear from y'all. Like, what is something that gives you hope in this sort of area? Let's try and end it on a hopeful note, please.
Honestly, looking back at when AIDS happened does bring me a lot of hope. Because we did in fact survive that, and seeing how that the queer community organized around that and straight up like at one point threw ashes of people who had died from AIDS onto the lawn and caused which then caused the president at the time to literally run away and then finally do something kind of does give me hope, because that was insane, but we still did it. And even though COVID was really hard for our community, and we are still feeling those ramifications, I feel like there's a little more awareness about like immunocompromised people. And I think slowly we're starting to wake up, but typically I also look within my own disability community, and like in ASWD, there's so many cool people there, and I can a lot of my friendships have been built on info dumping at each other, which is great because I can tell you my dad does not want to hear about how squishy the soft palette is because apparently that grosses most people out. Whereas I'm like, oh, I want to watch YouTube videos of this. So, like, stuff like that. And, like, in really dark times, like, community is the band-aid and is, like, the factor that will get you through.
This is a weird one to get help from, but I did a semester abroad in Denmark, and while I was there, I visited a number of countries across Europe. And America was actually, this really surprised me. America seemed to actually be better about accessibility compared to many of the places I was at in Europe, like Denmark and Copenhagen. All the sidewalks are even narrower, made out of cobblestone with like gaps between the cobblestones that could be a few inches wide, a few inches deep, like the sort of stuff that could easily trap the front wheel of a wheelchair. Most businesses had stairs to get inside, no ramps at all. And like I normally think of America as being behind on a lot of things compared to those countries, and the fact that we are decidedly ahead, at least compared to Denmark and Germany, where I spent most of my time. And can really make comparisons too, compared to those places. Like we're doing pretty good, and we have progress left to be made as a country, and also as a state and as a university. But like we can't have come a long way and are still further ahead in this than a lot of peer countries and a lot of other parts of the world. So that gives me some hope, I guess. It proves that progress can be made, and I think that that's valuable.
I was wondering if all of you are feeling, how to say this, threatened or uncomfortable or worried about our current political environment in how, not broadly, sorry, that would be a whole different conversation, but like how it impacts disabled folks, or could. Because I don't know how much has shifted that much right now. I've tried to read about it, but I haven't seen a ton.
Yeah. So as has probably been established, my view is very narrowly focused on specifically autistic advocacy and autistic movement. So I think some of the other panelists will be able to handle that part better. But for me, like the most distressing thing is the fact that language of disease has been brought back when it comes to autism. Like that, like that's the language that that's the language that was used in the 1930s and 40s to justify involuntary sterilization in the United States and Britain, and in Germany, actual murder of children and disabled adults. And so it's also the same language of like being used as of that the autistic child is a burden that is used to garner sympathy for parents and family members who potentially killed their autistic children and siblings. And then even and then that's the same rhetoric used to try to justify trying to find a cure for autism, as was the case from the 80s to only recently, like the last 10 years is where we begin to see that narrative kind of drop away until the current Secretary of Health and Human Services. Or then, as kind of is currently the case, the focus on unproven and even sometimes potentially harmful treatments to try and help autistic children overcome their disability. That is like the most kind of distressing thing for me with this administration.
Yeah.
I do, before we get going, I do want to point out we are at the hour. We're actually at about a minute over time now. I would love to keep going a little longer if we're allowed to go a little over time, but I think we should get the okay from the hosts before we continue on this topic.
For those of you that would like to stick around a little longer, including our panelists, you're welcome to do so. I will be here for as long as there are people. So feel free there. Liz has linked the schedule for the rest of the symposium in the chat. I can link that as well now. So yes, we can do, oops, I sent that in a direct message. We can continue this chat as our panelists have the time to.
To go off of what Alexander said, I kind of view this administration as and broadly a lot of the stuff they're doing as a fundamental just attack on healthcare, and the really the misinformation and just like the distrust in science as well feeds into that. And as someone who is planning to go into a healthcare, like I want to become a speech language pathologist, I really see it as an erasure. And also knowing that so many services that help so many people will get disrupted. And again, it's just kind of like the eugenics thing of just, I don't want to deal with these people. I don't like them, so I want them to not exist. And it breaks my heart really, because I had students in high school that I volunteered with, and that's what made me realize that I am disabled. And so like those students like changed my life, and everything I do is for them in some way, shape, and form. And every time I hear something in the news about that, I just think of them. And because I want to help them so badly, but this administration is trying to take away the tools that I would use to help them, and that's deeply upsetting.
Yeah, I am also very depressed about the future because of this administration, because they seem to really want to take away like health insurance and Medicare for a lot of folks, because a lot of disabled people are also low income and rely on these plans from like the government to get the care that they need, and it sucks. But I think we will survive and make it through.
Yeah. Ironically, a lot of the disability benefit programs are designed to keep you in poverty, and it's so this whole like disabled people are a burden thing is a situation that they have created. It's like you could, just stop being a jerk, then the world would get significantly better. But no, that would be too hard.
I personally am late for a club meeting, so I will have to log off. It was really fun doing the panel, and then y'all will be able, like, you don't need me to moderate from here on out. And yeah, no, I agree. Like the future does look kind of bleak, but fundamentally the way that we are going to get through this is by building community and actually sticking close to each other. Like that's how we're actually going to help build, not just survive, but actually build a world where everyone is able to thrive.
I think it might make sense to actually call it here. It seems like we've already had some folks leaving, and we are already about 5 minutes over time.
Yeah.
So
I do have to leave for work in like 5 minutes.
yeah, I feel like now's
almost
a good time to wrap it up.
For those of you still here, thank you for joining us. And thank you so much to our panelists from ASWD, Jennifer, Ryan, and Ash. And I hope everyone has an excellent